Here we go again. You have all heard of the old fable, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, where some little boy who lives in a village, he realizes when he calls out wolf really loud, all the villagers come running with pitchforks because they assume a wolf is attacking their sheep. And it turns out there is no wolf, and the boy finds it hilarious, and he keeps doing it night after night. And then finally, one night, there actually is a wolf, and the boy cries wolf, and nobody comes because they think he's lying. And then the wolf eats the sheep. And the governments and the global elites want this to happen to you because you've been desensitized by constant doom and gloom predictions by the alt media, mostly economic doom and gloom predictions, but as we all know, the economic doom and gloom predictions always morph into societal and total civil breakdown predictions. And so a great example of that is, for example, Peter Schiff, economic guy. What do I call him? A journalist, a blogger, investor, hedge fund manager. Anyways, he of course, for decades, he's been saying constantly, this system is not sustainable. This system is going to collapse. And he's right. But he says that every single year constantly, and he's right. And every so often there is some sort of collapse, like the dot-com bubble 2000, the 2008 housing crisis, and every time after they say, see, I predicted that. It's like, yeah, you sort of predicted it. A broken clock is right twice a day, but that doesn't mean that he's wrong. He just... it's just a constant doom prediction, which is eventually going to end up being true because we know the financial system is not sustainable. We know what degeneracy that society is descending into is not sustainable. And at some point, there will probably be some massive society level collapse. But that hasn't happened yet. And the government wants you to not be prepared for it because then they can come out on top, they can be in more control when it's happening, and they can more easily kill off 90 to 95% of the world's population, which is their stated goal, not a conspiracy theory at all. But it's one of those gaslighting things where if you say it in a bad light, then you're called a conspiracy theorist and you're fact-checked, but if you say it as if it's a good thing, they're like, yeah, you can publish books about it, like Klaus Schwab and The Great Reset. Anyways, so yeah, I was listening to this Mike Adams ebooks, and they didn't age well because it was in like 2020, and he was talking about how in November he was predicting 100%. His intelligence sources were telling him that society was just going to collapse into total civil war in November. The elections guaranteed Trump was going to win, and that was going to result in crazy protests turning into a civil war and then spreading all over the world, and things were going to get bad. And he said, well, even if Biden wins, there's still going to be da 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 da. That obviously didn't happen. That didn't come true at all. But that's just part of the whole QAnon PSYOP thing. QAnon goes all the way back to like the 1920s or even way earlier. Was conspiracy by the communists, basically a plan to get people to do nothing by convincing them that there were secret white hats hidden in government. That they had a plan. You just had to sit back and trust the plan, ready to go. If you read some of this material from, I forgot what year it was, sometime in the 1920s, it reads exactly like the Q stuff today. So it's amazing that people fall for it. But Mike Adams either fell for it or knew it was a lie and was pushing it because it was convenient. Now, Mike Adams is not wrong. Some kind of collapse like that is bound to happen. In fact, localized occurrences of such collapses have happened in countries where war or hyperinflation has broken out. For example, Venezuela. For example, Ukraine. Various things have happened at a local level, but nothing really big, systemic, widespread, global yet. It's possible that Mike Adams, the health ranger, by the way, genuinely thought that something like that would happen. And maybe he really had intel sources who were just QAnon people that were telling him that, like as part of a PSYOP, or maybe he was in on and he knew it was going to happen, but he's like, well, I'll sell more of my Ranger buckets, his whatever food storage things he's selling. And it's still good to buy stuff like that, obviously, but if you don't live on a farm where you grow your own food like I do, right? But or even if you do, sometimes you don't have enough food when you buy a property. You have to wait a little while for all that production to ramp up, and so it's good to have those kinds of things. But anyways, so you listen to all those kinds of predictions every single year, and a lot of people just kind of, it wears away on them, and they just get, their normalcy bias kicks in really strong, and it enforces it, because like, well, I hear this kind of thing every year, but nothing ever happens. The global elites are just too good at maintaining control, so I just got to keep going, and they just forget about preparations, they forget about whatever they need to do, they don't really do anything to change the life in a way that makes them more resilient against global systemic collapse type events. And so when you're hearing these constant predictions, most of what you hear is not true until the one that finally ends up being true. The idea is not to like, oh, is this going to be the one? Is this going to be the one? Like, don't convince yourself that when the prediction comes, it's actually going to come true. You're going to know it, and then you're going to have time to get prepared in time for this collapse. You'll just go balls to the wall and buy all this stuff, and then you'll be ready. Right now, you're a little bit prepared, but when you know it's coming, but everyone else is thinking like that too. And if it's actually obvious, so obvious that people like you will know that this is the one, then it's already too late to prepare. Then things go downhill pretty quickly. So you don't want to be in that situation where you're waiting for this one true prediction. All the predictions you're ignoring because they're always wrong. And really, what you should be thinking is your thought process. Perhaps it's like the chance of something like this, a global systemic collapse type event, or even something major in my country, whatever your country is. It increases every year because of the way that the economy and the hyperinflation of various fiat currencies, not going hyper yet, but increasing very rapidly, and all the kinds of societal degeneration, which the Bible warned us about. Every modern city is kind of turning into Babylon, Sodom, and Gomorrah all wrapped up into one. And so you see that and you think, well, obviously this is not leading to utopia. This is leading to dystopia, very obvious. So I should be gradually, according to my means, preparing myself and making whatever life changes that I can, and realizing I'll never be perfect. I'll never be perfectly prepared for anything that can happen, but I can at least try to get somewhere and continue living my life in the meantime and enjoying life, but also planning for the future. Maybe a little bit more than I have been doing, maybe a little bit more than you have been doing. So another thing, so after listening to this Mike Adams recording where he was predicting the 2020 thing that never happened, before he predicted that, he started talking about all his correct predictions. He's like, well, I predicted this in 2008 and this in 2000 and this and that. Right, okay. Anyways, so, and then he just proceeds to make a prediction guaranteeing it's going to happen, and then it doesn't at all. Not at all, but... Anyway, so I listened to another video of his this year where he said in 60 days it's all going to go up. Hyperinflation in 60 days. And this was like less than a month ago. He put out a video. Maybe a couple weeks ago he put out a video saying, okay, this is my prediction. Definitely, like, inflation is going up so quickly. Hyperinflation does happen gradually, then suddenly, right? So he's like, we got about 60 days before there's a bank holiday. All the banks close, no notice, overnight. Just wake up and you can't get money out of the bank. Everything's frozen. Hyperinflation is really starts going crazy. That's probably not going to happen in 60 days. But if it does, are you ready for it? Or are you at least somewhat ready for it? Just the fact that you're dismissing it, I'm dismissing it, that's probably not going to happen in 60 days. I'm sure the globalists can hold on for longer. That doesn't mean I'm not going to continue gradually preparing myself more and more for that. So a lot of you might be wondering why your Bitcoin is going down after going up for so many years. It's really not done well the past couple of years. And so Bitcoin is kind of behaving more like a stock, more like a financial, traditional legacy financial asset almost in terms of its speculation. It's not really going up while the dollar is going down. It's kind of going down with the dollar and as stocks go up. And kind of strange. There is a lot of manipulation. Sure, the globalists are holding it down, but they only have so much power. They can't dump all their money into shorting Bitcoin. In the end, there's some organic reasons why it's not doing well, and it may just be because, when hyperinflation happened in Weimar, stocks might have gone up 660,000%, but you don't get rich because the currency went down way more than that. So everything you have in stocks is still worth nothing, even though on paper it's valued more. So we might run into a hyperinflation type situation where Bitcoin does shoot up 100,000% so quickly, but the dollar goes down 1,000,000%. So your Bitcoin valued in dollars is still nothing. And maybe Bitcoin stays the same in gold. So maybe your one Bitcoin that today is like $30,000. Maybe after this hyperinflation event, it's maybe still $30,000 in gold, or maybe even less. But maybe now it's $7 trillion in dollars, but dollars are worth nothing. That could be what happens. It also could be that Bitcoin really does go up in real value in a hyperinflation type event. But as we know, I don't know how it's going to be, if there's a hyperinflation that eventually leads to a total societal collapse kind of thing, or if they're going to do their great reset, big bang all at once. The point is, whatever happens, try to kind of think what kind of situations can happen, and will you be ready? Like, do you have Bitcoin? Great. Do you have physical gold and silver? Do you have food? Do you have a source of water? Not just water in bottles saved up, because that ends quickly. Do you have various types of tools? Do you have what would happen in a solar flare where the entire grid goes down and all technology becomes useless? Do you have hand tools? And are they good quality? Or are they going to break after a few days and then you're screwed? All those things are good things to think about. Remember, I did a video a while ago, something about preppers. Prepping becoming a dirty word, or some I forget the title of the video, but I kind of came up with this theory. I was like, has the government started to discourage prepping? Because I see the media starting to talk about preppers in a really negative way, more and more over the years. And so I thought, how do I test this hypothesis? Well, let me just take one thing to test. I'll look at the CDC's and, well, not the FEMA, and then before that, the CDC. I think it was, I forget how many years I checked for each, but it was basically the United States government. I was like, what is the United States government's official recommendation for how much drinking water should be stored in case of an emergency for families? Because they have official recommendations for that kind of thing if you go on the FEMA website. I checked like 4 times in the last century, starting in the 40s and then going on later, like the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And sure enough, the amount of bottled water to be stored per person in the event of an emergency, as recommended by the U.S. federal government, dropped precipitously. I forget the numbers, but whatever amount they were recommending in the 1940s went way down. Now in the 2000s, they're recommending very little compared to what they were. So obviously there's, and that's just one thing, right? But obviously it's discouraged, or at least not encouraged anywhere. They can't stop recommending that because a lot of people are like, wait a second, what about in hurricanes? We have to have that stuff stored up. But they really want to make you dependent on FEMA in a crisis. So if they used to say store 20 gallons of water per person in a family, but now they say store 5 gallons, right? That's a 75% drop. Obviously, the recommendations have dropped a lot. They don't want you to prep as much as they used to, right? And prepping isn't all just about saving up things and buying things and storing food and water. It's also about skills and knowledge and training, physical training, mental training, knowledge. Did you know that you can eat tree bark if you're starving? Certain types of trees, not all trees. You can shave the outer part out and then shave the inner cambium layer out, and then you roast it on a rock inside of a fire, and it's a carbohydrate source. And I believe the Adirondack Native Americans, I think, used to eat that as a kind of a starvation food in winter when animals were scarce. Anyways, little things like that, right? It's good to know about stuff like that. I think I've pretty much run out of things to say. Hopefully I gave you some things to think about. So as you're hearing constant doom and gloom predictions from all these QAnon types, realize that one of the goals of the elites is to desensitize you to those types of predictions. So you really just don't ever prepare because you're like, that's never going to happen. They keep predicting that. I'm never going to actually put my pedal to the metal. But the idea is not about pedal to the metal prepping right when you know something's going to go wrong, because once you know, everyone knows and it's too late. The idea is just gradually keeping your mind in that mindset. And every time you hear Peter Schiff or Mike Adams or one of these guys say, the world is going to collapse next year, in 60 days, in 180 days, next election, it's all going to descend into civil war. And you've been hearing them say that for 20 years and it still hasn't happened. Think, okay, well, they're right. That is going to happen at some point. It's very obvious. Look at the world around us. We're getting closer and closer to that every day. So I should be gradually getting myself more and more prepared all the time. Always kind of thinking like that. Still enjoying your life in the moment, but also like, well, what would happen if this happened? What would happen if this happened? How would I save my family if this happened, right? Where should I be? Should I be living in the middle of this big city? That's the question that you should ask yourself if you are doing that right now, living in the middle of a big city. All right, have a great day, folks. So make sure you go to AmazonFruitFestival.com. January 17 to 23 in Southeast Ecuador. We offer detailed instructions for how to land and travel here, so you're not stranded at the airport. You know what to do, you know what bus station to go to, and everything. Make it very easy for people. AmazonFruitFestival.com. And you can also come for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. There's different options on the website. It's a good way to check out the land in this area, see if maybe you want to live here, for those of you who are interested in being a part of our small but growing community.